Welcome everyone, this is Honest Restart, and this time we're talking about Nintendo's continued silence on The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. I find it to be kind of peculiar. So last night we streamed the Game Awards, and I was reluctant to do so because, well, last year Nintendo had no announcements, and I didn't have the most abundant amount of hope that we would get an announcement for Tears of the Kingdom or other cool Nintendo announcements. Well, given how things went about on Twitter the last couple days, I felt that they were teasing enough for me to believe that it was worth watching the show. And sure enough, there were Nintendo announcements. There was a presence. We got news on a Bayonetta spin-off that's coming out this March, the one about Cereza. We got news about the DLC for Fire Emblem Engage. And we got two different trailers for the Super Mario Bros. Movie. One was an actual planned world premiere, and another was just like a commercial that had some localized footage that we had not seen before. So that was all great stuff. We actually saw a presence from Nintendo when it came to announcements. Not to mention, Nintendo was up for 8 different awards that I saw, and they won 5 of the 8. That was pretty good. The 3 they lost were all for Xenoblade, which was disappointing, but still, the game was up for 3 different nominations, including Game of the Year, so that in and of itself is high praise for Xenoblade. So, Nintendo had a presence, and I wasn't disappointed a lot, I guess I could say. Nintendo did something there, and I feel like next year I am probably going to watch the show again because they have shown that they are willing to make sure that they are important to some extent here, and they will show off some things. But they didn't give us what we wanted the most, and that was news for Tears of the Kingdom. What's strange about this is that Tears of the Kingdom won most anticipated game, something I doubted because Nintendo has been so quiet about this game. Yet, when they were talking about the nominations, when Jeff Keighley was presenting the award or getting ready to, when Tears of the Kingdom came up, the crowd was louder than any other game, and Jeff Keighley made sure to note that it appears to be a fan crowd favorite, and sure enough, Tears of the Kingdom won most anticipated game of the year, which was wonderful. But right after, they had another world premiere. It felt like everything was building up for this moment. It felt like we were finally going to get a Tears of the Kingdom trailer, something a little bit more to go off of until next year, and the opening moment still felt like it. It was in the clouds, it was in the air, it felt very much like Tears of the Kingdom. We saw this character flying on some sort of bird-like creature, so we were thinking, oh man, Loftwing, like from Skyward Sword. That would kind of explain why Skyward Sword HD just came out recently. Maybe there was always meant to be a connection to Tears of the Kingdom. And then as we continued watching for a few more moments, a few more brief fractions of a second, we realized, nope, this is Horizon, and yeah, we were disappointed. Nintendo fans, I'm sure Horizon fans were quite pleased, but it's just kind of weird that they decided to show off Horizon in a way that looked like Tears of the Kingdom. They went to the cloud, they had a flying creature, and this is even more strange when you take into consideration that there is a history of Horizon and Breath of the Wild comparisons. So, it was weird and disappointing and strange, but ultimately Nintendo made sure to have a presence at the show. Overall, I saw a lot of games at the Game Awards that I was actually kind of excited for, even going beyond Nintendo. So I'm not going to say the show was terrible, by no stretch. But after everything is said and done, we still know so little about Tears of the Kingdom. Why? What's with this continued silence on the game? Well, that's what we're focusing on today. Now, before we jump into things, let me first very briefly mention my social media. You may see a few different things here on screen. You can check that all out. It's linked in the description below. And if you haven't done so already, you may subscribe or perhaps even consider joining as a member. So there are a number of reasons why I find this continued silence on Tears of the Kingdom to be out of the ordinary. One of those reasons is based off of how Nintendo treated Breath of the Wild. You see, the E3 before Breath of the Wild came out, so June of 2016, they gave us a huge blowout of the game, and yet the game didn't release until March of the next year. So about a 9-month window where we learned so much about the game. That E3 was a huge blowout. It was entirely dedicated to Breath of the Wild, and we knew so much about the game. And when you compare how much we learned about the game at that point, 9 months before its release, and how much we know about Tears of the Kingdom now, and we're 5 months away from its release, it's very strange. It's a peculiar situation, and it definitely doesn't match up. But it's not just with Breath of the Wild that Nintendo did a better job of giving us information about the game before it came out. but even other games like Splatoon 3 and Xenoblade Chronicles 3. Never mind the fact that Tears of the Kingdom was announced back at 2019, it's been in development since 2017, but the reveal to release windows for those games were far shorter, yes, but also when we got their initial trailers, we learned way more about those respective games than we know about everything with all the information they've given us about Tears of the Kingdom so far. We still haven't seen any voice acting in Tears of the Kingdom, we don't know about boss fights or dungeons, we haven't gotten any extended gameplay, we know so little about the story, we're still not entirely sure about the beginning of the game. There's so many questions still. Yes, we did get a title, we do have a release date, but Nintendo has done an incredible job of being so quiet and secretive about this game. I do find it to be really strange because the game is just 5 months away. It's coming out May 12th. And when you take into consideration that this has been the longest wait between two major Zeldas ever, it becomes even more peculiar. The gap between Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom is the longest gap yet. And it's even more strange because Tears of the Kingdom is a direct sequel to Breath of the Wild. Typically, direct sequels have a very quick turnaround time. They are easier to finish and get done. And yet here we are with the longest gap ever, and Nintendo's being more quiet than they were compared to Breath of the Wild or even some of their other major games. It's a very strange situation, and it does lead to some suspicions arising. I'm not saying that the game's going to come out and be a dumpster fest or a dumpster fire or what have you, but I'm sure some people are speculating that. We're just coming off of the release for Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, and that's a huge buggy mess. I enjoy the game, but it does have its problems, and it doesn't match the typical level of Nintendo quality we've come to expect. Now granted, Pokemon is handled by Pokemon Company, and that's why there are issues. Nintendo has issued an apology and they are working to fix it, but it just kind of makes you wonder what's kind of going on. Now, I'm not trying to suggest that Tears of the Kingdom is going to have any issues. This is the Zelda team. The Zelda team is arguably the greatest developer in the history of the industry. When they come out with Zelda, it's of the highest quality. There is no such thing as a bad Zelda game. Every, at least 3D Zelda, is a Game of the Year candidate kind of game. They are significant quality releases, so I'm not worried about Tears of the Kingdom in that regard. I know when it comes out, it's going to be a great game. Will it surpass Breath of the Wild? I don't know. But it is going to be a great quality game when it does release. But it still doesn't answer to the question as to why Nintendo has been so quiet, because we already have a set release date. If it was still just a window, maybe they would still be up in the air for a potential delay. But with this set release date, it's very, very likely the game will not be delayed. The game may even be close to done, if not done already. We've heard about localizations and things of that nature. So it doesn't seem like Nintendo's rushing to get this game out. It seems like they're actually taking their sweet time here. They're waiting and they're being quiet on it, and it's just plain strange. So why? Why is Nintendo being so quiet? What gives? Well, I have a couple different theories. One theory is simply because they can get away with it. When we go back to Breath of the Wild, when they showed it off at E3 2016, it was the only game they had to show off. It was an incredible presentation. They showed off so much about the game. They did amazing. The game won E3, even though it was just one game. But that was kind of part of the problem. It was sort of demonstrating where Nintendo was at the time, because all they had to show was Breath of the Wild. The Wii U was a dark time in Nintendo history, and at the time, no one expected Nintendo would even come close to the levels of success they have seen with the Switch. So Nintendo just didn't have much else to show to tide us Nintendo fans over to excite us. But now, take a look at the Game Awards. Nintendo had several nominations that won, some of which didn't win, but there was a lot there. Nintendo had a huge presence. They have other games coming. They talk about Fire Emblem Engage in January. We have Kirby in February. There's a game like every month, really. So if Nintendo's doing so well right now, they don't have to tide us over with Zelda news every 6 months or so. They can get away with being quiet. And they have. Nintendo's still doing incredibly well. And even though Nintendo's done, I would say, a poor job of hyping us up for Tears of the Kingdom, it's still one most anticipated game for next year, despite that. So I know that when Nintendo does start to talk about this game, they are going to garner excitement. There's going to be a higher raised level of anticipation for this game, and it's going to perform well. Will it outpace Breath of the Wild? I would say that's really, really unlikely, but the game is gonna perform well, and it really just comes down to when Nintendo decides to talk about this game, and it may simply be the case that the reason they've been so quiet is because they can get away with it, and they rather focus on what's coming in the near future. Now, granted, Tears of the Kingdom is pretty near, but what we got at the Game Awards in terms of announcements was a January game in Fire Emblem learning about the DLC, a March game in this spin-off from Bayonetta having to do with Cereza. I don't remember the title, but you know, that's coming out in March, so they talked about that. Those are both before Tears of the Kingdom. And they also gave us a trailer and also a commercial revealing more stuff about the Mario Bros. Movie that's coming out in April. All of these things are before Tears of the Kingdom. Now, Tears of the Kingdom is not that much later. It's coming out in May, and it was up for most anticipated game, and there is a huge history of Zelda, and they've been super, super quiet. So I still feel like it would have been in great taste to talk about the game during the Game Awards, but it's clear that Nintendo is focusing on announcements that were coming in the even more near future. So that really could be it, as annoying as that is. But there's another possibility that I'm going to throw out there, and keep in mind, I don't fully believe this idea. It's an idea I've thrown around before. I've made some videos on it. It could be the case. I think it's a legitimate conversation to be had, and there's a good chance it could occur, but it could also go in an entirely different direction. So I'm really kind of 50-50 on this issue, but I think it should be said because it does kind of potentially answer the question as to why Nintendo's been so quiet about this game. And the reason it might be is because they could be saving Tears of the Kingdom and a blowout of information on this game when they want to show it off alongside new hardware. Now, I have a whole other dedicated video on this topic, so that'll be linked or what have you, but what's interesting is that yes, Switch came out in 2017, Lite in 2019, OLED in 2021. It's conceivable something comes out in 2023. There is a long history of Zelda being pushed alongside new hardware. Look at Breath of the Wild, Twilight Princess, Link's Awakening, Majora's Mask 3D. So it could be the case that again, they're going to be doing this for May. It may also answer the question as to why they're coming out in May and not to close out the fiscal year in March. It's kind of strange because we always have some sort of major release from Nintendo in March, yet 6 weeks later, Tears of the Kingdom is coming out. And based off what we've heard from voice actors having done the game, it seems like the game is, if not close to done, entirely done. They probably would have been able to make a March release, so why are they waiting? Well, maybe it's because they have new hardware coming, and maybe the reason they've been so quiet is because they have an event maybe planned in January or February where they're going to announce this new hardware. I'm not saying it's a next generation system, but it might be. But basically something that allows Switch games to run and look better. It won't phase out Switch. Switch will probably still be relevant for the next few years, and Tears of the Kingdom will still come out for both systems. But this might be a great way to showcase the abilities of the new system with Tears of the Kingdom, it looking and running better. And maybe that's why they're being so quiet on this, because when they have that presentation, it's going to be a blowout for the game. And maybe that's what they're aiming for. Maybe that's part of their plan. That could be the reason why. It's a possibility. But what do you guys think? What do you guys make of this continued silence on Tears of the Kingdom? Do you think Nintendo's holding out for a bigger event? Do you think they're simply focusing on other things right now because Tears of the Kingdom is just a little bit further out and they can get away with it because of how successful they are these days? Or is there another reason? Let me know in the comments below. Anyways, everyone, this is On Just Restart. Thank you so much for listening and watching, and I'll see you all really soon. Take care. Bye.